welcome to Game and Read. We are here for our first discussion video of our zombie pairing of Resident Evil HD remastered.
You can just say Resident Evil, it's the first one.
Resident Evil, and the book Feed by Mira Grant, which is the first of the Newsflesh trilogy.
Alright, so I have been reading the Feed book. I almost said the Newsflesh book, but that's not what it is.
It's sort of accurate.
It's Halloween, we've been drinking pumpkin beer. Give us a sec. Anyway, I've been reading Feed, and I've been liking for the most part. I guess I haven't been reading it. I've been listening to it on audiobook. It's been a pretty enjoyable audiobook read. Outside of a couple of the voices the narrator, the reader chooses to do, it's pretty enjoyable overall. If you're looking for a zombie book to listen to on the go, I recommend Feed. It's been pretty good so far. About halfway, a little bit more than halfway done. And it follows this brother and sister who are bloggers in the post-zombie apocalypse world. They are following a presidential campaign, and crazy stuff starts happening. Maybe there's a conspiracy. Who knows?
Now that I think about it, it's really timely that we do this because there's Halloween, and there's also presidential campaigns that are scary.
However, in this particular case, they are following a Republican nominee who is a moderate rather than our current one. Anyway, it's pretty enjoyable so far. It creates a very realistic zombie world, which is a bit of an oxymoron in itself. However, I think if you just say, okay, this is a zombie world, this seems to be about as realistic as a zombie world that I've seen. You know, it's mostly under control. There's different governmental regulations about who can go where and what. It's still a big issue. It's something that everybody's terrified about. Most people stay in their homes most of the time. You have to do blood tests all the time to make sure that you are not infected. Everyone carries the virus, but it's just kind of laying dormant, and it hasn't been, I think they use the term accelerated, or something like that.
I think so.
But it feels like it's a poppy novel, but at the same time it feels pretty realistic given the zombie circumstance, and I do have a lot of respect for that. There is a lot of detail into kind of what happened during the infection and all the big original outbreak. This is about 20-ish years in the future after that, so I really like it overall. I'm excited to listen to and read the end of it depending, but yeah, Feed by Mira Grant, good so far.
And I have been playing Resident Evil.
Rather, we have both been playing it together. We had to restart a game and just decide to work together because we both kept getting really stressed out and not doing well.
So I'm a giant scaredy cat. I thought I was going to be able to handle it, and it just makes me so anxious and my heart rate goes so high. But it's a really fun game. For as stressful and as scared as I have gotten, there was one part in particular we were playing and some zombies broke a window and started pouring in, and I literally shrieked. Other than that,
the way we've been doing it is Erin's doing most of it. I'm sitting there next to her the whole time. And then if something happens and she's like freaking out and can't work the controller, she tosses it to me, like literally throws the PlayStation controller at me. And then I start doing it because I'm not the one controlling it, so I'm less stressed out at that particular moment. And it's
true.
It's been a fairly effective system. We have gone much further than either one could do separately doing this particular strategy.
Yeah, so I'm actually really enjoying the game, as stressful as it is. It is sort of the opposite of Feed, which we'll get more into in a minute, but it is this, you're one woman. Well, we're playing as a woman.
We are playing as Jill Valentine.
Of course we are.
One of two potential protagonists.
You can also play as
Chris Redfield.
We are playing as Jill. And we are Jill in the beginning of like, what the hell are these things? And no one knows what's going on. And it's really freaky deaky. It's really freaky deaky.
Yeah, so we explained this all in our intro video, so go check that out.
If you don't know anything about Feed or Resident Evil, go watch our intro video because we talk about both of those things in much more depth.
Yes, so in kind of bringing them together rather than just reiterating everything that's going on, Feed is how I see the macro version of the zombie apocalypse, whereas Resident Evil is the micro version. And I mean that in that Resident Evil is very much in kind of the classic zombie movie fashion. It's about surviving. You don't know what's going on. The characters are like, what are zombies? This isn't a normal thing. And they're dealing with a very small version of it. Suddenly there are zombies in this weird spooky mansion where they were hunting for a serial killer or a group of serial killers. Whereas with Feed, everything's already happened. It's not about individual zombie attacks. They are a regular occurrence. Everybody knows most things there are to know about how to deal with zombie attacks.
It's very much a continuum more than contemporaries. So it's like Resident Evil is the beginning, right? Like this is how I imagine the world of Feed starting, is people are going in and they have no idea what's going on and they discover this. And then 20 years later, you get the society that sort of adapted to how zombies work and, well, sort of adapted. But you get this society that is dealing with the zombie outbreak.
And even the main protagonist, Georgia, in Feed, often talks about how people dealt with zombies right at the beginning of the outbreak. She will go on kind of long background tangents where she's explaining, oh, right when it started happening, everybody was like, oh, this is just like George Romero said, you know, famous zombie movie director, and all that, and how some of those myths were proven to be true, some were proven to be false in this particular world built by Mira Grant. And I think that's really interesting because some of the stuff that they are doing in Resident Evil is the stuff specifically Georgia says not to do. Things like going off alone, not being well protected, just kind of exploring randomly, all that kind of stuff is a no-go in the future zombie world where they already know how to deal with zombies.
And I think what's interesting about the sort of micro-macro zombie story in these is that Resident Evil is a survival horror. Survival horror. It's a scary game and you're trying not to die, right? And it's a kind of it's very spooky. It is got the kind of jump scares. It is a pretty serious game, I would say. Whereas the world of Feed is a lot less
horrific.
That's a good word. Horrific. It's more humorous, or there's opportunities for humor, whereas in Resident Evil, there are no opportunities for humor that we've come across yet.
True, and they both can be classified as horror. Resident Evil is definitely much more a scary movie, scary story. Monsters are there, try and make it through the night kind of situation. It all takes place in just one night. Whereas Feed is, we are dealing with this, just in the part I've gone through, it's been about 6 months, and they jump all across, going back 20 years to the present, and everything in between. So it's very much kind of surviving the existential dread of living in this time after the zombie apocalypse where life can feel cheap and ridiculous, and what's even the point? There's zombies everywhere, but I guess we'll keep trying to go on doing our normal stuff. The US government is still there in pretty much the same fashion because they're doing a normal presidential election, but some things have changed because of the zombies. People vote just from home, people don't go to meetings, and it's weird to kind of be courageous enough to go outside. Whereas Resident Evil, it's just kind of like a weird thing that's happening, and it's very spooky at the time.
Well, and the other thing that's interesting about both of these is that though the protagonists in both Resident Evil and Feed are very different, I mean, as we've talked about, it's this micro-macro beginning of the horror versus everyday life in the horror. Both of these sets of protagonists are unique in the sense that they are brave enough to go out and figure out what is going on and explore and push the boundaries. And they both have that quality of, adventure, which of course Resident Evil does. But I think that's a cool parallel that you have.
And even if you break it down into the gender lines of the main protagonists, Georgia has a brother, Sean, who's been her blogging partner. He specializes in, he's called an Irwin after Steve Irwin. He goes out and he likes to poke zombies and just be like, hey, how's it going? Hey, and mess with them and film that and turn that into his online content. Whereas Georgia is news-based, she likes the more factual evidence, she does some editorial stuff, but it's very much what you'd expect from a news-conscious blogger type person. And I think you can kind of translate those two roles a little bit over to the two special forces of the police agents, Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield. Jill is definitely, I mean, she is just as gung-ho as anybody on that team because they are special force police. She's a total badass in her own right, but she definitely comes across as a bit more cautious, whereas Chris Redfield is such a mid-90s like bad boy that in the West they had to censor him smoking because, you know, he was smoking in a video game, and that's why he has the lighter right away in that game. So there's definitely, that kind of continues on where they do kind of make this more conservative female protagonist versus the more gung-ho male protagonist, while they're all pretty kick-ass in their own right.
Yeah, they definitely don't cheapen the female roles though they are stereotyped in being the more conservative, more cautious, they are not without their own badass tendencies, which is kind of refreshing in a lot of ways.
Yes. So I think that's all we have for this particular video. We're going to keep playing, and I'm going to finish up the book for our next video in 1 or 2 weeks, and we will see where we get from that.
You can find all of our videos and all of our other content, like our book reviews, our reading wrap-ups, our podcasts, over at gameandread.com.
You can also find us on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and Litzy. If you use that, we are at Game and Read.
Listen to the podcast on iTunes.
And I think that's all we got. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time.